letters that could kill, trumpets said to start wars, and a statue that wiped out entire families. These are even more mysterious museums that contain items too dangerous to display. In the fall of 2001, most people had no reason to think twice about their mail. Letters showed up, you opened them, that was it. So when a few newsrooms started getting odd envelopes with no return addresses, people were a bit confused, but not necessarily worried. It'd be one thing getting a mysterious package with no return address, but what could be wrong with a harmless letter, right? Well, these were not harmless letters. On September 18th, someone mailed 5 letters from a blue postal box in Trenton, New Jersey. They were sent to NBC, CBS, ABC, the New York Post, and the National Enquirer. Inside was a light brown sandy powder. The first sign that something was truly wrong came weeks later. Robert Stevens, a photo editor from the company that owned the Enquirer, got seriously sick and ended up in the hospital. Doctors eventually figured out he had inhalation anthrax, something most Americans had never heard of. The United States Secretary of Health and Human Services at the time, Tommy Thompson, said it was an isolated case and that there was no evidence of it being a politically motivated attack. But then more letters surfaced, including one sent to senators. And one of these letters literally said, "We have this anthrax." When Senate intern Grant Leslie opened one of the letters, the powder burst across her clothes. A lot of people assume the letters were destroyed, but they weren't. After they were decontaminated, the FBI eventually allowed the Smithsonian's National Postal Museum to take a few of them. You can see them now. They weren't sitting in a display case all this time. They've been locked away for years because nobody wanted the public anywhere near them. When Howard Carter cracked open King Tut's tomb in 1922, he found all the gold and jewels, but among the treasure were 2 trumpets, one bronze, one silver. And like everything associated with King Tut, there was a dark legend attached to them. Supposedly, if you played them, war would follow, but it was just folklore, right? In 1939, the BBC decided to broadcast the trumpets over the air live. During rehearsals, the silver one fell and shattered when someone tried to fit a modern mouthpiece on it. Pieces flew everywhere, and Alfred Lucas, one of the original archaeologists, randomly collapsed. On the way to the studio, the broadcast engineer nearly got hit by a runaway horse, of all things, and the power went out just before the show. Instead of calling it off, though, the broadcast went ahead using candles to light the music sheet for the performer. Well, months later, Germany invaded Poland. World War II had begun. In 1967, a museum guard blew the silver trumpet for testing, and the Six-Day War broke out between Israel and its neighbors. In 1990, it was played again, right before the Gulf War, and in 2011, someone sounded one, and the Egyptian Revolution kicked off a week later. Trumpets are currently locked away in the Egyptian Museum. If you ever end up in Sydney, Australia, and you're the type who likes grossing yourself out, I guess, the Museum of Human Disease at the University of New South Wales is the place for you. This place is filled top to bottom with real human organs, preserved lungs, hearts, brains, all of them belonging to people who died of some gnarly disease. You're literally looking at what cancer did to someone's liver, or what a lifetime of smoking does to a set of lungs. Every jar and display has these simple labels that explain what happened, what caused it, and what the doctors found. Not a place for people with sensitive stomachs. In Florence, Italy, there's a natural history museum called La Spicola. It's the oldest public science museum in Europe, dating back to 1775. But most people come here for one thing, the anatomical wax models. These are hyper-realistic sculptures of human anatomy, created in the 18th and 19th centuries. Full-sized figures with every muscle, vein, and organ perfectly sculpted in wax. Some are posed like they're sleeping, others cut open to show internal organs. They're beautiful, but deeply unsettling at the same time. These models were created using beeswax mixed with dyes, turpentine, and sometimes gold dust to get the colors just right. The problem is wax is incredibly fragile. It melts. The museum has to keep the temperature very controlled. A power outage in summer could be catastrophic. There's also the question of what else is in these models. Some of the older wax formulas included mercury and other toxic substances. In 1966, a flood damaged a bunch of these pieces, and restorers spent years carefully cleaning and repairing them. The Hope Diamond is one of the most famous, or rather infamous, gems in the world. It's this massive 45-carat diamond that's been owned by kings, stolen during the French Revolution, and eventually ended up at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. It's said to be cursed. Legend says anyone who owns or wears it will be met with tragedy. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette owned it. We all know what happened to them. The diamond was then stolen during the French Revolution and disappeared for 20 20 years. When it showed back up in England, it passed through several hands, and almost every one of them went bankrupt or faced some kind of awful disaster. One American socialite, Evelyn Walsh McLean, bought it in 1911. Her son died in a car accident, her daughter overdosed, her husband left her and died at a mental institution. After she died in 1947, the diamond was found in a shoebox in her bedroom. A jeweler named Harry Winston bought it, and in 1958 mailed it to the Smithsonian. The mail carrier who delivered it got his leg crushed in an accident shortly after, and his house burned down. But since the Smithsonian got the diamond, nothing bad has happened. In fact, the museum's curator said owning it has brought nothing but good luck and helped them build one of the best gem collections in the world. Bisby's stoop chair looks like any old wooden chair, and it is an old wooden chair, but the story behind it is way heavier than you'd expect. It goes back to 1702 in North Yorkshire, England, when a man named Thomas Bisby was sentenced to death for killing his father-in-law. The two of them were running a sketchy coin forging operation together, and after a nasty argument, Bisby snapped and took his life. That part is documented. The part people still argue about is when the curse supposedly started. Some say Bisby was intoxicated at a pub, sitting in his favorite chair, and shouted that anyone who sat there after him would die. Others say he muttered something similar while being marched to the gallows. Either way, though, his body was hung on display near the inn, and the chair stayed right where it was. And over the years, stories started to spread about it. It seemed like people who sat in that chair ended up dying in accidents. During World War II, for example, Canadian airmen from a nearby base would grab drinks there. People swore that the ones who tried the chair never made it back from their flights. By the 70s, the pub owner had heard enough of these stories, and he didn't want the thing inside his building anymore, so he handed it over to Thirsk Museum. They still have it, but it's not on the floor. I mean, they literally mounted it high up on a wall so nobody can sit in it, even by accident.
Locked away in a museum's hidden chambers lies a chilling reminder of humanity's ancient past, the shockingly preserved body of the Toland Man. Discovered buried deep in a Danish peat bog, this 2,400-year-old Iron Age sacrifice victim looks disturbingly fresh, as if frozen in eternal sleep. Thanks to the bog's unique chemistry, scientists were not only able to determine exactly what his final meal was, but they could even lift his fingerprints after thousands of years. The rope still tightened around his neck suggests a grim, ritualistic end, fueling unsettling stories about ancient curses or vengeful spirits connected to his death. Museums carefully restrict access to him, afraid not just of damaging this priceless artifact, but perhaps wary of something darker lingering around the Toland Man's eternal resting place. Buried deep inside the vault of an undisclosed museum lies a chilling artifact you'd hope never to encounter, a bizarre, two-headed, bat-like creature preserved with disturbingly lifelike realism. Known simply as the dual-headed bat, this twisted specimen was first rumored to be discovered hidden within an old Victorian mansion, stashed away inside a locked chest marked with strange, illegible symbols. Its grotesque appearance, featuring sharp teeth, elongated limbs, and unsettlingly expressive faces, immediately sparked rumors of occult practices and dark alchemical experiments from the past. Curators remain tight-lipped about its true origins, perhaps fearing that its mysterious presence brings with it sinister energies best left undisturbed. Hidden in the deepest archives of a museum's forbidden collection rests an object so chilling, many believe it holds a genuine demonic presence: the horned demon mummy. Sealed carefully in a velvet-lined wooden box, this tiny skeletal figure with sharp horns, pointed ears, and grotesque fur-covered legs immediately conjures images of dark rituals and forbidden occult ceremonies. Rumored to have originated from an 18th century occultist who claimed to have summoned creatures from the infernal realms, this artifact was quietly donated to the museum under very mysterious circumstances, accompanied by warnings never to open its enclosure after midnight. Museum employees whisper tales of strange noises and unexplained shadows around its location, leading to it being carefully locked away, far from curious eyes that might accidentally awaken something best left sleeping. Hidden deep within a museum's secret storeroom sits Sydney Knows, an antique fortune-telling machine with a reputation darker than its cheerful, painted smile would suggest. Originally popular in the early 20th century arcades, visitors would would insert a penny and eagerly await Sydney's predictions printed on small cards. But soon, unsettling stories emerged. Sydney's predictions often came disturbingly true, frequently foretelling accidents, illnesses, or tragedy. Some visitors claimed the doll's eyes would follow them, and whispers circulated of late-night workers hearing laughter or seeing Sydney operate without being activated. Frightened by the growing legend, museum staff quietly removed the machine from display, locking it securely away, though some still wonder if Sydney already knows exactly what awaits those who disturb him again. In a dimly lit museum archive sits one of the most unsettling children's books ever created, a pop-up book titled Medical Oddities, Nature's Anomalies and Carnival Gaffes. While pop-up books usually enchant children with playful characters, this particular volume does exactly the opposite. It is definitely not a children's book. Within its pages lurks a disturbingly realistic, mummified human face, accompanied by eerie photographs and unsettling descriptions of sideshow performers and bizarre anatomical specimens. Originally created as a macabre curiosity from the Neville Colmore collection, the book quickly gained notoriety when rumors began to surface about it causing nightmares, insomnia, and unexplained illnesses among those who dared to read it. Museum curators quietly pulled it from public display, locking it securely away, wary of the strange aura and the unsettling feeling that some pages are better left unopened.
In 1739, a strange bronze object was discovered near the town of Aston in England. It had 12 flat faces, each a perfect pentagon, with a hole in the center of every face. Small knobs protruded from every corner. This object became known as a Roman dodecahedron. Since then, over 120 of these objects have been found across Europe. They date back to the Roman Empire. Every single one is slightly different. No ancient text references them. No inscriptions explain them. No Roman writer ever mentions their purpose. Museums will display them, but here's the catch. They refuse to label them with a definitive explanation. Some archaeologists believe they were used for surveying or measuring distance. Others think they were knitting tools, military rangefinders, candle holders, or religious objects of some kind. None of these theories can be proven fully, though. Experiments fail to produce consistent results. The British Museum and others openly admit they do not know what these were used for. The first time scientists tested this object, they assumed the equipment was malfunctioning. In the city of Delhi, India, stands a massive iron pillar over 23 feet tall and weighing more than 6 tons. It was erected around the year 400 CE, during the reign of Chandragupta II. What makes it extraordinary is not its size, it's the condition. The pillar has stood outdoors for over 1,600 years, through monsoons, extreme heat, and pollution, and centuries of exposure, but it's barely rusted. Modern metallurgical analysis revealed something deeply uncomfortable. Iron contains an unusually high phosphorus content, almost no sulfur or manganese. This composition creates a passive protective film that prevents corrosion. The problem is this: producing iron at this purity level requires precise temperature control and advanced forging techniques that historians insist did not exist at that time. Museums and textbooks accept the pillar exists, but they refuse to describe it as evidence of advanced ancient technology. Instead, it is framed as this lucky accident or a one-time fluke. Despite decades of study, no ancient text explains how this thing was actually made. No tools have been found that could replicate it using known methods. Modern engineers still struggle to recreate the same corrosion resistance without industrial processes. In 1912, archaeologists excavating burial mounds near Lake Delavan in Wisconsin uncovered several human skeletons. Multiple skeletons measured between 7 and 8 feet tall. Their skulls had unusual proportions, including elongated craniums and double rows of teeth. These were not amateur diggers either. These were professional archaeologists working with the Beloit College Museum. Newspapers across the United States reported this discovery. Photographs were taken, measurements were recorded. Then the remains were sent to museums, and they disappeared after that. The Smithsonian Institution is denied possessing any such skeletons. Beloit College claims records were lost. No bones remain on display. No formal explanation was ever released. The existence of the skeletons is undeniable, though. The rejection lies in what they would imply about human history. In 1936, a couple walking near London, Texas discovered a hammer partially embedded in limestone rock. The rock surrounding it was estimated to be over 100 million years old. The hammer itself was made of iron that was 96.6% pure. This level of purity is difficult to achieve, even with modern metallurgy. The hammer was examined by metallurgists. The wood handle was partially coalified, meaning it had begun turning into coal. Museums refused to accept this object as ancient. Instead, they claim the rock formed around a modern hammer due to mineral accretion. However, this explanation fails to account for the metal composition or the coalification of the handle. The hammer exists today in private collections. Museums will not display it, not because it's fake, but because it disrupts established timelines. When miners uncovered this fossil, scientists immediately said it was impossible. In 1899, a human finger bone was discovered embedded inside a solid coal seam in Oklahoma. Coal layer was dated to the Carboniferous period, around 300 million years ago. Coal does not form quickly. It requires immense pressure over vast periods of time. Anything embedded within it should be just as old. Bone was examined and confirmed to be anatomically human, not a primate, not an animal, a human finger. Museums rejected the find outright. They did not attempt to prove it was fake. They simply declared it intrusive, meaning it somehow worked its way into the coal long after formation. The problem is there was no fracture line, no surrounding disturbance. The coal seam was intact. Rather than investigate further, institutions archived the report and excluded it from official records. There's a book at Michigan State University called Shadows from the Walls of Death, and it's even more ominous than it sounds. Published in 1874, it's basically a giant collection of wallpaper samples dyed from arsenic pigments, including the infamous Paris green. Back then, people loved bright, unnatural colors for their walls, but nobody really understood that these pigments were toxic. Touch the pages, inhale the dust, it could make you sick or, even worse, kill you. Originally, there were about 100 copies, but most were destroyed because they were too dangerous to exist. Only 5 survived. The ones that did are treated not just as fragile artifacts, but lethal ones. They used to be locked away completely. Even now, only trained staff can handle them. The pigments on the pages are old, but they still pose a real risk. If they flake, tiny particles could get absorbed through the skin or inhaled. The story of the woman from Lem statue starts in Cyprus in 1878, when a small limestone figure from around 3500 BCE suddenly appeared. Cyprus has produced hundreds of figurines like this, and the woman from Lem is shaped like the others, but not quite. The hips are much wider, the details are almost smoothed away, and the legs aren't really defined. It looks like it belongs to the same world, but also like it doesn't fit neatly with anything else archaeologists were finding at the time. What really pushed it into legend, though, were the deaths tied to its owners. The first name attached to it is a man called Lord Elfont, and the story claims he and 7 members of his family died within 6 years of bringing the statue home. After him, it supposedly passed to Ivor Manucci, whose family died within 4 years. Then it went to Lord Thompson Knoll, and the same thing happened. The last private owner was said to be Sir Alan Biverbrook, and after he, his wife, and their daughters died, his sons donated it to the Royal Scottish Museum. Even the curator who handled it reportedly died not long after. The strange part is that when you go looking for these names in real records, they're not there. No official trace of any of them, and the museum doesn't publicly list the statue, but supposedly it is there, maybe locked away too dangerous to display. At the Natural History Museum in London, you'll find the Delhi Purple Sapphire, a beautiful gemstone with a very dark legacy. In 1857, during the Indian Mutiny, a British soldier named Colonel W. Ferris took a purple sapphire from a temple in Kanpur and brought it back to England. At first, he probably thought he'd scored a prized gem, but soon life started going sideways. His finances collapsed, family members fell seriously ill, and bad luck just seemed to follow him wherever he went. When he lent the stone to a family friend who later took their own life, Ferris started to wonder if the gem was actually cursed. By 1890, the sapphire had landed with Edward Heron Allen, a scientist and writer who didn't believe in superstition, but even he couldn't ignore the odd pattern. A friend he lent it to was hit by a streak of terrible luck, and a singer who wore it claimed she lost her voice. Heron Allen tried to get rid of it, throwing it into a canal, but it was found and returned to him. Eventually, he locked the gem inside 7 boxes lined with charms and sealed it in a bank vault, leaving strict instructions instructions that it shouldn't be opened until long after his death. When he died in 1944, his daughter sent the stone to the Natural History Museum, where it sat until 1972, and that's where curator Peter Tandy finally opened it, and found Heron Allen's warning letter inside, ending with a single line, "Throw it into the sea." And the Black Orlov is said to be one of the most cursed diamonds in the world. It was sold to a private owner in 2004, but it's been displayed at several museums, including the American Museum of Natural History in New York and the Natural History Museum in London. Story goes it was originally stolen from a Hindu temple in southern India, where it had been the eye of a Brahma statue. Legend has it a priest caught the thief in the act and cursed the stone on the spot. From that moment, death and disaster supposedly followed anyone who owned it. In the 30s, a New York diamond dealer named J.W. Paris bought the gem to the US to try and sell it. Not long after, he jumped to his death from a Manhattan skyscraper. Two Russian princesses later owned the diamond, and both ended up taking their own lives within a few years of each other. Iceland is full of weird museums, apparently. There's one in a public toilet dedicated to punk music, there's a museum of witchcraft, and then there's the Icelandic Phallological Museum, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the world's only museum dedicated to collecting private parts from every male mammal species. There are over 300 specimens. The collection includes everything from a hamster dong that you need a magnifying glass to see, a 170 centimeter section of a sperm whale dingus that weighs nearly 155 pounds, and it's displayed in a giant glass tube filled with formaldehyde. Most of the specimens are preserved in formaldehyde or dried and mounted on walls, but formaldehyde is toxic, of course. Prolonged exposure causes respiratory issues, skin irritation, and it's been linked to cancer. The museum has to carefully control temperature and ventilation because if those seals break, you've got toxic fumes filling the building. The founder started the collection in 1974 after friends gave him a bull's junk as a joke, and he spent decades collecting specimens from whales, seals, polar bears, and eventually in 2011, even a human donor. The museum gets about 70,000 visitors a year. The Science Museum of Minnesota keeps a lot of its more dangerous items in the back, away from visitors. One of the main things they don't put on display is a snakeskin quiver from the Chachi people of Ecuador. Inside it are thin darts that were traditionally coated in curare, a poison that can paralyze you by shutting down your muscles. The darts are old, but the museum has them carefully stored away because nobody really wants to take chances with something that was designed to instantly drop an animal. They also have a shark tooth spear, a wooden pole lined with real shark teeth, sharp enough to slice skin with barely any pressure. Staff say these kinds of weapons are hard to handle because you can cut yourself just by picking them up the wrong way, so they keep it wrapped and secured in storage. Another item that never makes it to the public exhibits is a preserved green mamba. Even though the snake has been dead for years, the species is known for having one of the most dangerous venoms in Africa. It's just safer for everyone if it stays in the research labs in the back. In St. Joseph, Missouri, there's a museum housed in an old mental hospital. It's called the Glore Psychiatric Museum, and it's one of the most disturbing places you can visit. The museum was founded in 1968 by George Glore, who worked at the Missouri State Hospital for over 40 years. He wanted to show people how far mental health treatment had come by displaying all the barbaric stuff that they used in the past. And when I say barbaric, I do mean it. There are full-size replicas of devices like the tranquilizer chair, which strapped patients down so leeches could be applied to their skin. There's the bath of surprise, which involved plunging patients into ice-cold water. A lot of them drowned. There's the lunatic box, a wooden cage barely big enough to stand in, and then there's a giant treadmill where patients were forced to walk for up to 48 hours straight. The museum also has real equipment from the 20th century, electric shock devices, lobotomy tools, restraint belts, ice picks used for lobotomies. One exhibit shows 1,446 nails, pins, screws, and buttons that were surgically removed from a patient's stomach. Another shows a TV that a patient stuffed with over 500 handwritten notes because he thought a television would transmit them to God. The Imperial War Museum in London has a lot of weapons and wartime objects, including some that are still dangerous. Right in the atrium, there's a V2 rocket from the 40s. During the war, these things destroyed huge chunks of London. One landed just yards from where the rocket sits now, destroying an apartment building and killing 43 people in 1945. Between September 1944 and March 1945, more than 1,000 of these things were fired at Britain. Tens of thousands of workers died just making the rockets and their explosives before any of them even left Germany, and thousands more were killed or injured when the missiles hit, of course. The rocket at the museum was brought over in 1946. And is almost 46 feet tall, stretching close to the ceiling. It's safe now, but seeing it up close does give you a sense of just how destructive it was. At the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum in New York, they've got green wallpaper from the 1830s. Back then, green would fade or turn brown, but in 1775, a chemist named Carl Wilhelm Scheele came up with a pigment that stayed bright. The museum's sample from 1836 used that pigment. Thing is, it's loaded with arsenic. Gregory Heringshaw, the museum's curator for wall coverings, explains that the danger mostly comes from handling it, saying the toxins are released mostly when they're rolled or unrolled or when you're pasting the back, which adds moisture. That moisture sets off chemical reactions that release the arsenic into the air. The wallpaper isn't on display, it's carefully wrapped and stored at consistent humidity. Down in Key West, Florida, there is a Civil War fort that's been turned into a museum, and inside that museum is what many consider the most haunted doll in America. His name is Robert, a seemingly regular-looking stuffed doll made in Germany around 1904. Looks like he came straight out of your grandma's attic, but don't let that fool you. This doll has a reputation that's gotten him featured on every paranormal show you can think of. The story goes that Robert was given to a boy named Gein Otto when he was a kid in Key West. Gein became obsessed with the doll. He'd talk to it for hours, and his parents swore they'd sometimes hear two different voices coming from his room. Neighbors reported seeing Robert move from window to window when the family was out. Furniture would be found overturned in Gein's room, and every time, Gein would say the same thing. Robert did it. After Gein died in 1974, the doll ended up in the attic. The new owners had a younger daughter who claimed Robert tried to attack her multiple times. In 1994, Robert was donated to the Fort East Martello Museum, and to this day, people say that cameras and electronics malfunction around him. Most staff won't go near him alone, and they get letters all the time from people writing to apologize to Robert for disrespecting him, begging him to lift whatever curse he'd put on them. In the late 1800s, a crystal skull surfaced in Paris. It was carved from a single piece of quartz with extreme precision. The most famous skull, known as the Mitchell-Hedges skull, was later discovered in Central America. Quartz is one of the hardest materials to carve. Experts estimate it would take years using modern tools. Museums initially accepted the skulls as ancient artifacts, but then in the 1960s they quietly reversed course. Instead of proving they were modern fakes, museums simply refused to display them. Testing produced conflicting results. Some showed tool marks, others didn't. Today, museums classify them as unverified and avoid the topic pretty much altogether. The skulls remain real objects with no agreed explanation. In the 1930s, German archaeologists uncovered a clay jar near Baghdad. Inside was a copper cylinder and an iron rod. When filled with an acidic solution, it produces a small electric charge. This object dates back nearly 2,000 years, though. Known as the Baghdad battery, it demonstrates a basic understanding of electrochemistry long before electricity was thought to exist. Museums acknowledge that the Baghdad battery exists, of course, but they refuse to label it as a battery. Instead, they suggest it may have been a scroll holder or ritual object. Repeated experiments show it generates electricity. In the late 20th century, sonar surveys off the coast of Japan revealed a massive stone structure beneath the ocean near Yonaguni Island. Divers documented step terraces, sharp right angles, massive stone platforms, and what appeared to be carved staircases. Some blocks weigh thousands of tons. The structure sits over 80 feet underwater. Geological dating suggests it was above sea level more than 10,000 years ago. That would place its construction before the accepted rise of civilization. Museums refuse to classify it as man-made. They acknowledge the formation exists, but say it could be just natural erosion. Despite all the flat planes, the straight edges, the consistent angles, independent geologists argue the structure shows clear signs of this being shaped by tools. Museums will not engage, though. As a result, the site remains in limbo. In the early 1900s, archaeologist Henry Fairfield Osborne examined a fossilized human footprint alongside prehistoric animal tracks in Nevada. The footprint appeared in the same geological layer as extinct Ice Age animals. If accurate, it would mean humans existed far earlier than accepted timelines. Museums rejected the finding. They labeled the footprint a natural formation, and no further analysis was permitted. The moment this discovery was analyzed, it threatened to break the human timeline in half. In 1866, miners digging a tunnel through Table Mountain in California uncovered a human jawbone buried deep beneath layers of volcanic basalt. The rock above it had been formed by lava flows dated to over 9 million years ago. This was not loose soil. The jawbone was sealed beneath solid volcanic rock, meaning it had been there before the lava hardened. The bone was sent to Harvard University and examined by Dr. J.D. Whitney, the state geologist of California. After studying the surrounding geology, Whitney concluded the jawbone was genuinely ancient and could not have been introduced later. If that conclusion were accepted, it would place humans in North America millions of years before current models allow. Museums immediately rejected the finding. Rather than disproving the geology, institutions labeled the jawbone a hoax or a misplaced modern bone, despite no evidence of intrusion. Basalt layers showed no cracks or disturbances. The mining tunnel had been sealed since its creation. Eventually, the discovery was removed from official publications. The specimen itself has vanished. The discovery was never proven false. It was just erased. At the Whitby Museum in England, there's a shriveled, mummified hand kept under glass. It's what's called a hand of glory, a legendary object made from a severed hand. Supposedly, back in medieval times, thieves would make these from the hands of executed criminals. The idea was you'd light the fingers like candles, and supposedly everyone in the house would stay frozen asleep while you robbed them blind. Sounds ridiculous, but I mean, people believed it enough to actually make these things. The one in Whitby was found in 1935, hidden inside a wall of a cottage in Yorkshire. When they examined it, scientists confirmed that it was human. Doesn't really take a scientist to confirm that, though. I mean, just look at it. It is eerily well preserved. What they don't know is how it was preserved, which makes it even creepier. Staff say people get uncomfortable around this thing. One curator mentioned it's the one item nobody wants to move when they're rearranging exhibits. Next up is Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. This place looks like an old library, very classy looking, but won't find shelves of old books here. This museum is macabre, to say the least. You've got jars of preserved organs, remains of conjoined twins, skulls with diseases and deformities. It is gnarly stuff, but it's also really fascinating. I'd check this place out for sure, but what most visitors don't think about is that a lot of this stuff is actually hazardous. Back in the 18 and early 1900s, medical specimens were preserved using whatever chemicals worked. Arsenic, mercury, formaldehyde. And those chemicals don't just evaporate. They're still in there, still active. During some renovations, they actually had to close sections of the museum off because fumes were leaking from old jars. Just being near certain exhibits required safety measures. And then there's the biological side. Some of the tissues came from people who died of infectious diseases back when medicine didn't fully understand how they were transmitted. So there's a real question of whether any of the biological material could still pose a risk. The museum's been pretty upfront about it. A lot of their collection isn't even on display because it's either too fragile or too dangerous. Delbridge Museum of Natural History in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. In 2023, this museum suddenly shut down. They locked the doors and sealed off the taxidermy wing. Turns out the taxidermied animals on display were dangerous, contaminated with arsenic and other poisons. See, back in the early 1900s, taxidermists would soak animals' hides in arsenic soap to keep bugs from eating them. It worked great. Problem is, a century later, you've got displays that are basically toxic. The Great Plains Zoo, which sits right next to the museum, tested the collection and found that trying to clean or restore these things would just release carcinogenic dust into the air, so they made the call to just lock it all away and eventually dispose of it all. Nobody thought twice about standing right next to a mounted bison or elk. Kids probably touched the display cases. The whole time, there were harmful chemicals in the air. In Maryland, you'll find the National Museum of Health and Medicine. There are rows of shelves with preserved organs, deformities, amputated limbs, body parts from Civil War soldiers. Some of it's viewable, but a huge portion is locked away in storage, and there's a few reasons for that. First, A lot of these specimens are still sitting in their original 19th century preservation chemicals. Again, stuff that gives off harmful vapors if the seals break down. Staff work in ventilated areas with protective gear because just being around old jars can be a health risk. But there's also the ethical side. Some of the specimens were collected at a time where standards were not what they are today. Fetuses, body parts taken without proper consent. Museums are rethinking what should even be displayed anymore. But don't worry, there are still tons to see. Bits of human remains from autopsies, battlefield recoveries, and medical experiments. The Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. is one of the most famous museums in the world, but it also has some legitimately dangerous stuff tucked away in storage. Not what you'd think, either. It's old watches, airplane instrument panels, lab equipment. Thing is, it's all coated in radium paint. In the early 1900s, radium was used all the time. It glowed in the dark, so they used it in clocks, gauges, some old medical tools. Nobody understood how deadly it was yet. Factory workers, mostly women who later became known as radium girls, would even lick their brushes to get a finer point while painting with radium. A lot of them got sick and died from radiation poisoning. Now, those same objects are sitting in lead-lined storage at the Smithsonian. The conservation team uses Geiger counters before handling anything. Some pieces are safe enough to display for short periods, but others are giving off radiation levels that just can't be near the public. There's also a stash of uranium glass and radium health products that were sold to people back in the day. Radioactive water, radium suppositories, all kinds of insane stuff marketed as cures. And yeah, early science was pretty reckless. We were playing with things we just didn't understand. So, at a lot of museums, deep in storage, there's stuff that could actually hurt you if it wasn't handled properly. At University College London, there's a small museum called the Grant Museum of Zoology. It's packed with thousands of preserved specimens, everything from tiny insects to whole animal skeletons, but the real concern isn't what's in the jars, it's what the jars are filled with. Most of these specimens have been sitting in formaldehyde or ethanol for over a century. Formaldehyde, we talked about earlier, it's a known carcinogen, and ethanol, when stored improperly, is highly flammable. The museum's most famous exhibit is a jar containing 18 moles, all crammed together and preserved in industrial methylated spirit, which is 95% ethanol and 5% methanol. Staff have to be extremely careful when handling it. If those old seals break down, well, you'll have toxic fumes leaking into the air. You've also got the Negus collection, which is a bunch of animal heads that were cut in half to show the larynx. Those are preserved in formalin, a mixture of formaldehyde and water. Museums with collections like this have very strict protocols. Staff wear protective gear, they work in ventilated areas, and they use Geiger counters if they think any specimens might be radioactive. There's a town in Quebec, Canada that used to be called Asbestos. In 2020, they changed the name because, who the hell wants to live in a place called Asbestos? But for over a century, this town was home to the Jeffrey Mine, one of the largest asbestos mines in the world, and they have a museum dedicated to it. The Asbestos Mineral Museum sits right next to the old mine, which is now just a massive water-filled crater. Inside the museum, though, they've got samples of chrysotile asbestos, which was once called the miracle fiber, because it's heat-resistant, it's strong, it was used in thousands of products. The thing is, asbestos fibers are microscopic and they're sharp. When you breathe them in, they pierce your lungs and they don't come out. Over time, that's obviously not good. Could lead to mesothelioma, which is an aggressive cancer. The museum displays raw asbestos samples, mining equipment, and products that used to contain it. Staff have to be extremely careful though, because any disturbance to the samples could release fibers into the air. And now we head back to the Science Museum of Minnesota, where there's also a collection called the Museum of Questionable Medical Devices. It's full of these bizarre, terrifying, and completely ineffective medical equipment from back in the day. There's a machine that claims to diagnose your personality by measuring bumps on your head. There's an electric therapy chair that was supposed to cure constipation by just violently rattling you. And then there's the X-ray shoe fitter. This thing was used in shoe stores in the 1920s all the way through the 70s. You'd put your feet into a machine, it would take an X-ray so you and the salesperson could see how your feet fit inside the shoes. It sounds convenient except these machines were constantly leaking radiation. Customers were getting blasted with X-rays every time they used it, and people used it a lot. They'd stick their feet in multiple times just because it was kinda cool to see your bones. By the 70s, most states had banned them, but one was still being used in West Virginia in 1981. The museum's X-ray shoe fitter is sealed behind plexiglass now because even decades later, it's still giving off low levels of radiation. In Las Vegas, paranormal investigator Zak Bagans runs a museum full of allegedly haunted and cursed objects. But the crown jewel of the collection is probably the Dybbuk box. It's a small wooden wine cabinet about 12 inches tall, and it's considered by many to be the most haunted object in the world. The story starts in 2003 when a guy named Kevin Mannis bought the box at an estate sale in Portland. He claimed it belonged to a Holocaust survivor who said it contained a Dybbuk, which in Jewish folklore is a malicious spirit that possesses people. Inside the box were some strange items: 2 old pennies, locks of hair, a dried rosebud, a small golden goblet, and a granite slab with Shalom carved into it. Mannis said that as soon as he bought the box home, weird things started to happen. Nightmares, unexplained smells. His mother had a stroke shortly after touching it. He tried to give it away, but nobody wanted it, so he sold it on eBay. The next owner reported their hair falling out, having hives, coughing up blood. Then Jason Haxton, a museum curator, bought it and wrote a whole book about his experiences with the box. He claimed it made him sick, and that he had to consult rabbis to figure out how to contain it. In 2016, he donated it to Zak Bagans. Post Malone visited the museum and was there when Bagans touched the box for the first time. Post touched Bagans' shoulder while he was holding it, and shortly after, Post's plane had to make an emergency landing when the tires blew out. His Rolls-Royce got in a serious accident. His house was robbed. The box is still on display at Bagans Museum, and people still report feeling sick or uneasy around it.
Number 10. Dybbuk box. In Jewish folklore, a Dybbuk is an evil spirit. Supposedly, someone accidentally summoned the demon while using a homemade Ouija board, but managed to trap it inside the wine cabinet. The Dybbuk box came to light in 2001 when Kevin Mannis purchased it and started having terrible nightmares. He then decided to gift the cabinet to his mother, who suffered a stroke the very day she received it. Not just this, but every person who ever owned that wine cabinet has reported experiencing horrible events. The last owner of the cabinet, Jason Haxton, found out the box possesses a spirit of a malicious Jewish creature called a Dybbuk, who has the ability to haunt and possess the living. Jason not only had nightmares but also developed a strange skin disease and began coughing up blood. At that point, Jason contacted his local rabbis and sealed the Dybbuk back in the box. Jason later, wanting nothing to do with the box, gave the cabinet to Zak to display it in his museum. You actually may have heard of this box before because in 2018, fans of rapper Post Malone claimed that his spat of bad luck was caused by his contact with the cabinet. Number 9. Charles Manson's cremated ashes. Charles Manson was a criminal who created a cult called the Manson family. It was active in California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Now, the group consisted of approximately 100 followers who had lived an unconventional lifestyle and frequently used psychoactive substances. Now, the members of the cult believed that he was Jesus Christ and followed everything he did. Now, some members committed a series of 9 deaths at 4 locations in July and August of 1969. In 1971, Manson was convicted of first-degree homicide and conspiracy to commit homicide for the deaths of 7 people, including the film actress Sharon Tate. When Charles Manson died, his body was cremated, and some of his followers actually took fragments of his ashes to keep as a memento. This led to such creations as the Ryan Almighty blood paintings of Manson, in which the eyes were filled in with Charles's own cremains. Painted in Ryan's own blood, the artistry has to be appreciated, but the morbidness of the painting with the cremated ashes included makes for a unique piece, to say the least. This very painting is on display at the museum along with other Charles Manson memorabilia, including a prison-worn outfit, Manson's own TV, and even more ashes in a display case along with Manson's dentures. Number 8. Love Ranch bed. Zak acquired the bed and bedroom furniture, a bunny ranch in Love Love Ranch owner Dennis Hoff, which eerily includes the mattress Dennis died on. Dennis died in that room of a heart attack on October 16, 2018. He was 72 years old. Now this just so happens to be the same mattress Lamar Odom was on when he overdosed 3 years prior in October 2015. Safe to say a lot of bad things have happened on that mattress. Zak says they never swapped out the mattress in the Love Ranch room, and now folks at the legal Nevada brothel believe it's cursed. Zak said that he was told that the bed was cursed, so of course he wanted to add it to his collection. Number 7. Dr. Jack Kevorkian's van. Jack Kevorkian publicly championed a terminal patient's right to die by physician-assisted suicide, embodied in his quote, "Dying is not a crime." It said that he assisted at least 130 patients in ending their lives. For this, he was convicted of homicide in 1999 and was often portrayed in the media with the name of Dr. Death. Jack, who died in 2011, lived out of a van for periods of his life and used it to carry out some of his crimes. Zak found this van and paid $32,500 for the rusty 1968 Volkswagen van, which has been parked in storage at the American Jewelry and Loan Pawn Shop on 8 Mile in Detroit. Now it sits at his museum for all to see. Number 6. Demon House Staircase. From a very intriguing standalone documentary of the same name, the Demon House was an investigation undertaken by Zak and the team at a home in Indiana, where the family claimed that numerous members of the family had been possessed by a spirit. The local police department and even social services within the local area were convinced that the house was some way haunted. From footsteps in the corridor to full-on body possession, the Demon House creeped Zak and the team out more than anything we've witnessed on the show before. Now Zak actually purchased the home for himself for investigations back in 2014 and used it to film the documentary before bulldozing it entirely in 2016, taking pieces of it, including the staircase, back to the haunted museum.
This place looks charming when you first walk in, with its vintage wood cabinets and old medicine bottles. The aesthetic is perfect, so much so that people have weddings here. It's funny when you think about what's actually inside those bottles though. The New Orleans Pharmacy Museum preserves 19th century apothecary history, which means they've got shelves full of legitimate poisons: arsenic, mercury chloride, laudanum, which is basically liquid opium that was sold over the counter. Some of the liquids in those bottles are original, like they've been sitting there since the 1800s. The museum keeps certain cabinets locked or sealed in glass because the powders have crystallized over time, and disturbing them could be dangerous. There's also a whole section on voodoo cures and love potions that were laced with narcotics. The museum's basically a preserved poison shop. One of the curators joked that if an old bottle broke, they'd have to evacuate the building, which I guess wasn't really technically a joke. At the British Museum in London, you'll find the Unlucky Mummy. It's not an actual mummy, it's a painted wooden coffin lid from an ancient Egyptian priestess who lived somewhere around 950 BCE, but for over 100 years, people have blamed it for deaths, accidents, financial ruin, all kinds of misfortune. This thing was even partially blamed for the sinking of the Titanic. It was first found in Thebes in the 1800s. Early collectors who owned it reported weird streaks of bad luck. Newspapers in 1890s London ran with it, turning the coffin lid into this cursed object. The museum eventually put it behind glass. Even now, though, some visitors refuse to take photos of it, afraid something will happen to them. Also in London is the Hunterian Museum, which had the skeleton of a man named Charles Byrne on display for over 200 years. Charles Byrne was known as the Irish Giant. He was 7'7" and became a public spectacle in 18th century London. But before he died in 1783, he made it very clear that he did not want to be dissected or put on display. He was terrified of ending up in a museum. And they were like, screw that, we're putting you on display at a museum. The surgeon John Hunter bribed someone to get Byrne's body and had it preserved for his collection. And for 2 centuries, Byrne's skeleton stood behind glass, part of the museum's medical exhibit. Then in 2017, the museum finally decided to take it down. They said it was never theirs to display in the first place, and keeping it up, of course, violated Byrne's wishes. Byrne's skeleton is still in the collection for research purposes, but the public can't see it anymore. Is that the right call? I don't know. I think it was wrong right after he died, but I mean, it's been 200 years. Put that big sucker up, let people gawk. The Codex Gigas is massive, 3 feet tall, 165 pounds, bound in leather that's probably animal hide. It's one of the largest medieval manuscripts still around, and it's nicknamed the Devil's Bible because of this full-page illustration of Satan inside it. The legend goes that a monk wrote the entire thing in one night after making a pact with the devil to avoid execution. It's now kept in the National Library of Sweden under tight environmental controls. They barely handle the thing. Visitors can see it through glass or look at digital scans, but actually touching the book is limited to a handful of experts. Not only is the book a delicate artifact, but the inks and tanning agents used in the binding contain toxins that can damage skin. So, in a way, this supposedly cursed book sorta lives up to the legend. And of course, we gotta talk about the Warren Occult Museum. It's not open to the public anymore, but the collection is still there, and it's full of items from actual cases Ed and Lorraine Warren worked on. There's all sorts of stuff here. A cursed piano that supposedly plays by itself, haunted paintings, shrunken heads, vampire coffins, and of course, the most infamous item in the museum is Annabelle the doll. But she's not the creepy porcelain doll from the movies. The real Annabelle is just a Raggedy Ann doll, like the kind you'd find at a garage sale, which somehow makes it worse. Annabelle in the movies is just so over the top looking. But the doll's been sitting behind glass for decades with a sign that says positively do not open. The story goes that priests had to come in and bless the room regularly because stuff would happen whenever people disrespected the doll. The most repeated story is about a guy who kept knocking on the glass and laughing, making fun of Annabelle. Then he died in a motorcycle accident that same night on the way home. Lorraine Warren said they handled the doll like a loaded weapon. They wouldn't move it without saying prayers first.
First up at number 10, we have the Haunted Mirror. Found in the Museum of the Paranormal and Occult, this dark mirror is said to show you much more than you will ever want to see. The Mobile Museum obtained this cursed mirror from the original owner, who claimed to have purchased it while attending a psychic fair in the Columbus area. Now, there are lots of alleged cursed mirrors out there, some said to be haunted by demons who escape in the night, torturing whoever possesses the cursed glass, which, don't get me wrong, is definitely terrifying. However, this particular object has more of a eerie, foreboding quality that is sure to send anyone who looks into it into a spiral. According to the museum, those that dare gaze into the cursed mirror claim to be struck with very upsetting visions, and some even reported ghastly sightings such as their own corpses staring back at them. Moving on to number 9, Ed Gein's Cauldron. So a little backstory on Ed Gein, aka the Butcher of Plainfield. He was a and a body snatcher between 1947 to 1957. Gein grew up very religious. His mother was a devout Lutheran who taught her sons that women were inherently promiscuous and instruments of the devil. Gein became very attached to his mother, arguably a little too much, and after his father and brother both died, Gein became his mother's primary caregiver. But after she died in 1945, something snapped and he became a totally different person. He began to visit graveyards at night, digging up middle-aged women that had similarities to his deceased mother before bringing their bodies home and mutilating them, using their skin to make covers for his furniture, masks out of their faces, or even using the bones for decorations and dishes. Even creepier was when he began creating an entire woman suit from various different exhumed bodies, as he wanted to be able to become his mother and literally be in her skin. It is believed that this cauldron was used by Gein to not only store the stolen body parts, but primarily to boil them so that the skin could be removed from the bone more easily. Nowadays, this cursed cauldron is found at the haunted Zak Bagans Museum and is definitely one of the most terrifying things found inside. Moving on to number 8, the Hope Diamond. As the legend goes, back in 1666, a French merchant obtained this beautiful blue diamond after illegally plucking the gem from a Hindu idol and selling it to King Louis XIV, a sacrilegious crime for which he was later mauled to death by dogs for committing. Fast forward a few years to the French Revolution, and the cursed gem was allegedly stolen again, this time disappearing for years, only reappearing in the 1800s. For years, experts questioned where this jewel had been hidden, but their curiosity was short-lived As soon the jewel wasted no time ruining lives of those it interacted with, and has routinely been blamed for several tragedies over the years. Some of the misfortunes include the loss of great fortune, people's deaths, and people taking their own lives, while some even say Marie Antoinette's death could have been linked to her possession of the cursed diamond. Nowadays, this cursed object is safely stowed away as a part of the Smithsonian Institution, so let's just hope it's never found and stolen again. Otherwise, who knows what could be unleashed. Moving on to number 7. Mandy. Back in 1991, the Quesnel District Museum received an anonymous donation in the form of a doll, which I mean is never a good start. The donor informed them that she could no longer handle living with the doll due to her constant crying and relentless ability to move objects or even make them disappear, and that essentially she was just way too creeped out and starting to fear for her life. Allegedly, the museum contacted a psychic to see if the information they got from the donor was true, and as it turns out, it was. The psychic advised the museum to get rid of the doll and not keep it, but they went against their advice and included it in one of their exhibits anyways. Soon Mandy began haunting the halls of the museum. Visitors claimed to hear disembodied footsteps, the sound of tapping glass, and some even swear they witnessed her face change and her eyes blink. Even creepier is that when the museum decided to place Mandy alongside other dolls in the same case, the next day all the other dolls were either damaged or found tossed onto the floor in front of the case. After that, they tucked her away and kept her hidden, just in case. Moving on to number 6, the book box. Back in 2001, a man named Kevin Maris purchased the box from an estate sale. When Kevin bought the item, he was warned to never open it. He agreed and suspiciously took it back to his antique shop, placing it in his basement. But still, the box wasted no time unleashing paranormal activity. The next day, Kevin went downstairs to find all the lights smashed, and his employees were terrified, saying they'd heard unruly screaming coming from the basement for hours. Now, for whatever godforsaken reason, Kevin decided the box would be a great gift for his mom, and so he opened it. Inside, he found a note that read "Shalom," 2 locks of hair, a candlestick holder, and some dried rosebuds, but unknowingly, he also released a demon. One day, his mother surprised him by dropping by the shop, so he gave her gift, only to come back minutes later to her unresponsive. After he rushed her to the hospital, they discovered she had suffered from a severe stroke. After this, he began taking the curse more seriously, so he tried to sell it at his shop, but anytime anyone bought it, they would promptly return it. Eventually in 2003, he put it up on eBay, and a paranormal enthusiast purchased the box, who quickly regretted that purchase after they were haunted by an old woman who would choke them in their sleep every night. It was passed down a few more times, each owner experiencing horrible health issues or claiming to be haunted by an evil demon, until it was eventually purchased by museum owner Zak Bagans and placed in his Occult museum.
Number 5. The house itself. The mansion housing the museum has reportedly been haunted for years. It was built in 1938 and owned by businessman Cyril S. Wenger, and rumor has it dark rituals took place in the basement in the 1970s. There was a pentagram found in the basement, and this is where supposedly a young boy was sacrificed. It is some kind of satanic altar supposedly to invoke the spirits down there, and it's an extremely evil place in the house. During the tour, they try to usher people through the basement as quickly as possible because it's so scary. Now, the mansion at one point was turned into a law firm where strange occurrences continued before the place was purchased by Zak and was eventually converted into Zak Bagans' The Haunted Museum. Number 4. Bela Lugosi Mirror. Hollywood star and Dracula actor Bela Lugosi is one of the world's most famous horror actors, but did you know that he once owned a mirror believed to be haunted? It is reported that he was obsessed with practicing a form of clairvoyance, which would involve him staring into inanimate objects to try and conjure messages from spirits. One such object reportedly used by the actor for such practice was a mirror, which hung in Bela's Hollywood Hills home. Zak was given the mirror by the niece of lawyer and B-movie producer Frank Saltry, who formerly lived in the home once owned by Bela. However, Frank tragically died at the home in 1982, and following his death, the producer's family inherited the mirror. Soon after bringing the mirror home though, the family began to notice that paranormal activity began to occur in their own home. Believing Bela's own practices and her uncle's his death to have affected the mirror, she later took the object to paranormal investigator Zak. After taking the mirror from Frank's niece, the star also encountered his own paranormal experiences around the mirror when he investigated his own museum for a 2017 episode of Ghost Adventures. This included seeing a ball of light that appeared on the opposite wall of the mirror, which Zak said traveled across the room and went inside the mirror. Now that sounds extremely haunted to me. Number 3. Ed Gein Cauldron. Ed Gein ended the lives of people and was a grave robber. He created costumes, furniture, and other keepsakes from the bodies of his victims. A police raid on his house turned up masks literally made from human faces, a belt of nipples, and a corset created from a skin torso. To be clear, he never wore these costumes when ending people's lives. Instead, he donned them in the privacy of his home. Now, some masks appeared to be mummified, almost dried out, while others were more carefully preserved. A few had lipstick applied and looked more lifelike, and 4 had been stuffed with paper and hung on the wall of his bedroom, almost like hunting trophies. Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs, and Norman Bates were all based on Ed. Zak paid $2,800 at an auction to take possession of the 25-gallon cauldron Ed used to discard his victims' entrails when he gutted them. The thing had been sitting in a Wisconsin woman's home, used as a flower pot ever since Ed's 1984 death in prison. When she died, her son wisely believed the cauldron was cursed and wanted it gone, so now it's Zak's. Number 2. Peggy the Doll. Warning, looking into this doll's eyes can cause you to have health issues or even get haunted. Please watch at your own risk. Now, Peggy the Doll is a 3-foot tall doll that has a blonde hair bob with glassy blue eyes and is considered to be the most haunted and dangerous doll in the world. After being purchased at a car boot sale, the owner began having nightmares and felt as though she was being haunted by the doll. She contacted Jane Harris, a paranormal and haunted doll investigator, and eventually sent the doll to her. Jane and her team of psychics began working with the doll, running experiments, or having paranormal sessions with it, and began posting photos and videos of the doll online. That is when she began to receive comments from people who had seen the video, and immediately after viewing began to have chest pain, nausea, and or crippling headaches. So yes, she can haunt you through a screen. Jane has come to the conclusion that the doll is possessed by the spirit of a woman who was born in 1946 who died of a chest-related condition like asthma. Now, Peggy's picture alone is said to cause anxiety, heart attacks, and headaches. Now, Peggy is treated with extreme respect in the museum. She has her own room and a spirit box which is linked up to the room so guests can interact with her if they wish. Many guests have received very strange feedback through the spirit box, including being called out by name and conscious replies to certain questions asked on her guided tours. Now, looking up information about Peggy was absolutely terrifying, and Peggy, if I accidentally looked into your eyes, I am so sorry. And coming in at number 1 is the Devil's Chair. Ed and Lorraine Warren helped exorcise a possessed boy named David Glatzel in the early 80s. They did many exorcisms on David, and Lorraine said that David levitated, ceased breathing for a time, and even demonstrated the supernatural ability of precognition. During his exorcisms, there was also a rocking chair in the room that would allegedly rock on its own, levitate, and even vanish and reappear. David and Lorraine also claimed to have seen the devil sitting in it. Now, Zak purchased the chair to be on display in his museum, but he had been forced to shut down his haunted rocking chair exhibit. Why? Well, Zak and his friend noticed the door to the chair's room slowly creaked open all by itself. Zak also says a light focused on the chair went out when a power cord was mysteriously yanked out of the wall. 2 hours later, he said a woman collapsed, began bawling, and asked, "What is happening to me?" Shortly thereafter, she fell unconscious, according to Zak, who adds that the woman was upstairs, directly above the rocking chair exhibit. Later, Zak said 5 of his tour guides throughout the museum started crying uncontrollably. After just a few tours on opening night, the stress was too much for Zak, and it forced him to shut it down altogether for the night. For now, Zak says the haunted rocking chair exhibit is closed until further notice, but in the middle of 2022, YouTubers Sam and Colby, who are paranormal investigators that I love, by the way, were given special permission to not only see or touch the chair, but to sit on it. The results were insane, and let me just say they are braver than me, because Wow.
Hidden behind a secret door in Denmark's Little Museum of Nykøbing Falster, sorry, my Danish isn't very great, museum workers uncovered something straight out of a nightmare. A grotesque, wolf-headed humanoid preserved with unnerving realism. During renovations in 2017, staff stumbled upon a concealed chamber containing crates, documents, and sketches belonging to the eccentric Cornelius S.C. Rotter, the building's mysterious former owner. Among his bizarre collection was this unsettling figure, carefully crafted from animal fur, bones, and disturbingly lifelike materials, sparking whispers of occult rituals and forbidden practices. Museum curators remain baffled, uncertain whether Rotter intended this creature as dark art, a ceremonial relic, or something far more sinister. Whatever the truth, it now remains locked safely away from public eyes, hidden in the back rooms, perhaps for our own protection. Hidden away in a museum's shadowy backroom sits a grotesque artifact that blurs the line between myth and nightmare. The skeletal remains of what can only be described as a centaur, a creature straight out of ancient Greek legend. Discovered tucked away behind locked doors in a European curiosity museum, this bizarre skeleton immediately sparked wild rumors about its origins. Constructed with startling anatomical precision, the piece seamlessly combines genuine human and equine bones, fueling unsettling theories of secret experiments or occult rituals conducted centuries ago. Museum insiders have hinted that the skeleton's origins trace back to an obscure 18th century collector known for his obsession with mythological hybrids, though details remain intentionally vague. Whether a twisted scientific hoax or a dark artifact with a genuinely cursed past, one thing's clear: there is a good reason it's being hidden far from the eyes of the public. Tucked away in a dimly lit museum storage room, hidden from public view, stands an artifact so strange it immediately sparks a sense of dread. A skeletal creature with oversized, almost alien features, known simply as the Atacama skeleton. Originally discovered in Chile's Atacama Desert, early tests baffled researchers due to its tiny size, elongated skull, and startlingly abnormal anatomy, fueling wild theories that ranged from extraterrestrial life to ancient curses. More detailed analysis eventually confirmed it was human, yet the mutations that warped its bones remained an eerie mystery, some speculating that ancient rituals or secretive experiments were involved. Now locked away behind closed doors, the skeleton remains a haunting relic, too unsettling to display openly, too intriguing to completely discard. Hidden deep within a museum's forbidden archives lies an artifact straight from your darkest childhood fears, a tiny, grotesque mummy known ominously as the Pixie specimen. Recovered by a private collector known as Alex CF, this bizarre creature has sparked unsettling debates about its origins. With its shrunken, shriveled body, disturbingly lifelike features, and remnants of fiery red hair, it appears horrifyingly genuine. Some speculate it was crafted as a macabre Victorian curiosity, while others believe it to be physical evidence of mythological beings like fairies or pixies secretly studied by occult societies. Locked away and rarely mentioned publicly, the Pixie specimen remains shrouded in secrecy, its unsettling presence haunting museum curators brave enough to enter the back room alone. Hidden in a dark museum storeroom lies an artifact so terrifying it feels plucked straight from sailor legends, known as the Fiji mermaid. Originally displayed in sideshows during the 19th century, this particular specimen is among the most unnerving ever discovered. Combining the dried upper torso of a monkey with the scaly body of a fish, its grotesque, glassy-eyed stare has sparked rumors of dark rituals, curses, and sightings of real aquatic humanoids. Sailors once believed owning a Fiji mermaid brought storms, shipwrecks, and madness, making museums hesitant to place them openly on display. Locked away, carefully hidden from public view, this creature now sits silently, fueling chilling whispers about what else the seas and secret museum storerooms might be hiding.
In our number 5 spot, we have the Museum of Death. The Museum of Death, located in Los Angeles, California, USA, is one of Hollywood's horror museums, in my opinion. It apparently has the largest selection of artwork from serial killers. So yeah, it definitely possesses one or two haunted items. Oh, and did I mention that the museum has a head as one of its items on display? Yeah, what the heck, right? It's the head of French serial killer Henri Landru. There are crime scene photos from the Manson murders, and also many execution devices. Gosh, as terrifying as this all sounds, why do I still want to go? Curiosity always wins. In our number 4 spot, we have Vent Haven Museum. The Vent Haven Museum is located in Kentucky, and not gonna lie, it fully gives me the creeps. It was created by a man by the name of William Shakespeare Berger. Great name. The museum is famous for its doll collection. Man, I'm not gonna lie, I loved dolls before Most Amazing. Now I find them terrifying. Hopefully I never have to do a haunted Barbie video while working here, because that will probably destroy all of my happy childhood memories. Anyways, apparently this museum has 800 dolls. Yeah, a lot of people say that they are haunted, but honestly, if you walked into a space with that many dolls, I'm sure you probably would think that too. In our number 3 spot, we have the Museum of Shadows. Apparently this museum has gained a reputation for being one of the most haunted museums in the US. It is located in Nebraska, USA. Apparently it was once a brothel, so maybe that explains the initial low vibes, but in any case, it allegedly has over 1,000 possessed objects from all over the world. There are many reports of paranormal activity coming from the objects over the years, but also people have witnessed ghosts in this place and have heard laughter from time to time. Lovely. In our number 2 spot, we have the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast Museum. This is probably one of the scariest museums that I have ever come across, and that is because it is literally a former crime scene. It was previously the home of Lizzie Borden and her family, and this is the place where 2 of her family members, if you haven't heard the story of Lizzie Borden, well, she was accused of killing her father and stepmother, and most believe this to be true even though she was set free of all charges. They turned her house into an overnight museum, and the place is filled with gruesome photos that are in the rooms where the bodies were found. Apparently there is a celebration breakfast ready for you if you survive the night. Kinda terrifying and awesome at the same time. Most likely this place has a few possessed items lying around. In our number 1 spot, we have the Warren Occult Museum. The Warren Occult Museum in Connecticut is a museum that was opened by Ed and Lorraine Warren in the 80s, and the items inside are items that they accumulated on their travels to help free spirits and clear homes. The number 1 most haunted and supposedly dangerous item in their possession that is possessed is the Annabelle doll, of course. They also have a doll called the Shadow Doll that goes into people's dreams and supposedly stops their heart while they sleep. There is a large man structure that was used for satanic rituals and a human skull used for black magic. I mean, the list goes on and on. These guys aren't even hiding their possessed items, they're just owning them and showcasing them for the world to all get creeped out. Coming up at our number 10 spot, we have Zak Bagans' The Haunted Museum. Zak Bagans' The Haunted Museum is called a haunted museum for a reason. Located in Las Vegas, there's some pretty scary stuff in there. It is known for having possessed objects, and it is proud to do so. From a painting with the real ashes of Charles Manson painted into the eyes of a portrait of him, to Ted Bundy's glasses, this is a museum with some of the most low vibe items from some of the worst criminals, and so obviously it would be haunted and the items would be possessed. I mean, they advertise it in the name, so they own it. In our number 9 spot, we have the Swansea Museum. The Swansea Museum is said to have one very possessed item, the Swansea Devil. This is an item that looks like the devil, and people have confirmed that they definitely think it is haunted. It has a pretty interesting backstory actually. In 1890, an architect by the name of Sir Arthur Bloomfield beat out a local architect for the job of rebuilding the ancient St. Mary's Church, and the local architect was not okay with it. Apparently, a few years later, he ended up purchasing a row of cottages facing the church, and so he tore them down and built a large red brick building there, and he put a statue of a smiling devil on it. He then placed a curse on the church, proclaiming it to be destroyed and that the devil will look upon it and its rebel smiling. Yikes. Jeez, I love that he wants wants to rebuild a church, a place for love and forgiveness, and then because he doesn't get his way, he fully does everything that he can to make the church a negative place. Clearly a man who studies the Bible and its teachings. Not. Perhaps he didn't get the job because the priests sensed how insane he clearly was. Anyways, the devil statue resides in this museum and it's clearly haunted. In our number 8 spot we have the Royal Scottish Museum. Ah, the Royal Scottish Museum. That was British, not Scottish, Melissa. It honestly sounds like a classy place to go to. Probably because of the word royal, but whatever. Apparently this museum is slightly terrifying because it is the holder of one very possessed item. An item so haunted that if you touch it, you will die, as well as your family. Not joking. The woman from Leb statue is at this museum, and it has been known to belong to many families that have all passed away after owning it. Within only 6 years of owning it, all 7 members of this one family passed away. This actually happened a few times until it was donated to the museum. The artifact is said to be from 3500 BC, but was found in Cyprus in 1878. So yeah, to say that the museum is showcasing a possessed object would be an understatement. In our number 7 spot we have the Louvre. The Louvre, located in France, is one of the most beautiful museums in the world. Honestly, it is one of my favorite places to visit in the world, even though it definitely has 1 or 2 or 10 possessed paintings on display. From Dante and Virgil in Hell, to the Sabine woman, to the Children of Edward, to St. Peter of Verona, I have literally made another whole video on the haunted paintings at the Louvre because there's just so many. But of course, there would be. The Louvre houses some of the greatest artists in the history of the world. Of course, there will be some art that is created when a human is having a bad day, but also there are evil people that paint, and that energy would certainly come through in their paintings. But honestly, the Louvre is magical even with the possessed paintings. Put a visit to it on your bucket list for sure. In our number 6 spot, we have the Mutter Museum. The Mutter Museum, located in Philadelphia, is a museum that once started out as a sort of, Ripley's Believe It or Not, and eventually turned into, well, something else. An American medical inventor by the name of Dr. Thomas Mutter donated a bunch of tools and got it off the ground. It's a museum where you can find some odd medical items such as an amputation kit from the Civil War, and my personal favorite, a long human colon that apparently once had 40 pounds of, well, poop. I'm a classy gal. The area that people believe is filled with some possessed items is called the Bone Room. I wonder why. It is a room filled with human skulls. 139 skulls, in fact. Lord knows why. They probably all come alive at night like the movie Night at the Museum. Creepy. The skulls all have descriptions as to how their owners passed away. Like an odd little memorial. Not spooky at all.
Moving on to number 5. Pearls of Death. It's probably a pretty safe blanket rule that you shouldn't go around touching too much of anything you find in Ed and Lorraine's demonic collection, but some things are definitely worse than others, and this next one falls into the latter category. Notoriously one of the most dangerous items found inside the Warrens Museum, the Pearls of Death is a cursed necklace said to do exactly as its name suggests. Allegedly, anyone who dares place them around their neck will be choked and suffocated to death. Coming in at number 4, the Shadow Doll. When it comes to creepy dolls, I'll be honest, it doesn't take too much to freak me out. But with that being said, there is definitely a very good reason why the Shadow Doll is one of the most feared possessions in Ed and Lorraine's museum. Now, what starts off the seemingly endless list of creepy things about this doll is that there is no definitive answer as to why it was created or who created it. But according to Ed and Lorraine's files, it was made using both human and animal bones and was absolutely used in satanic rituals. So it is definitely possessed by some less than ideal company. Said to have been found in an antique shop by a couple, they began to think something was wrong after they kept waking up night after night covered in inexplicable scratches. But it wasn't until the doll began showing up in their nightmares, telling them that she was going to them, that they decided to get rid of this terrifying toy. And good thing they did too. Legend has it that if someone takes a picture of this doll, she will visit you in your dreams and you in your sleep. Good thing she is tucked away and hard to find. Moving on to number 3. conjured chest. Believed to have been built somewhere around 1830, the story behind this terrifying object all starts with a man named Jeremiah Graham. As the legend goes, he was making preparations for his firstborn, which included this very hand-carved chest that had been made by one of his slaves. However, Jeremiah was not initially satisfied with the chest, and the enslaved man, Remus, received several beatings from Jeremiah and died from the injuries. Now, for obvious reasons, this didn't sit well with the other enslaved members of the community, and to avenge his death, they decided to cast a curse on the chest to forever torment the family that had killed their friend. Unaware of this curse, the chest was moved into the nursery, and soon after they began noticing that anytime someone put clothing into the chest, they ended up being involved one way or another in a tragedy, usually their death. Years later, a woman named Virginia is said to have tried to reverse the curse, enlisting the help of her maid to gather what was needed to put an end to the suffering, but it doesn't appear to have done the trick. For a few more generations, the chest continued haunting all that opened it, until finally it was donated to a museum and hidden away forever. Moving on to number 2, Peggy. When Jane Harris, who specializes in haunted dolls, received a package in the mail, it did not take her any time to figure out that this one was very scary. Inside the package was a blonde-haired doll with a note explaining that her name was Peggy and that she was haunted. Apparently, the woman who mailed it had tried seeking a priest out to exorcise the doll, but it was unsuccessful, and the woman no longer wanted the doll in her house as she was starting to fear for her life. Jane began an investigation immediately, posting numerous photos online for feedback. Now, a day later, she had 80 emails claiming that the photos of Peggy had made them nauseous or given them intense migraines. Then she got the most frightening message of all. Apparently, one woman suffered a heart attack after looking at the photo. And while she survived, a heart attack from a photo of a doll is a lot. After just 4 days in her custody, Jane began feeling Peggy's wrath and suddenly became very ill. But when a friend took the doll away, Jane's health improved immediately. Peggy does not like anyone to know much about her, but she is known to invade people's dreams and give them haunting news. One woman said Peggy came to her in a dream telling her to watch out for her cat. The next morning, her cat died. After a while, the spirit that was trapped in this doll made life very difficult, and so Jane eventually gave it to a museum. Peggy is now locked away under constant supervision and actually requires a waiver before you can see her face to face. And last up in our number 1 spot, the Bassano vase. As the legend goes, the Bassano vase was a gift for a 15th century bride on her wedding day. But tragically, the bride never made it down the altar as she was killed the eve before her wedding, still clutching her beloved gift. It's said the bride vowed revenge for never being able to reach the altar and marry, and many believe the curse lives inside the vase as each member of her family who took possession of it after her tragic death died soon after. But the strangest thing about this cursed object is that it vanished from the public eye for literal centuries. Somewhere between the 15th century and 1988, the vase's location was unknown until it popped up at an auction in Lira and sold for $4 million. The vase was allegedly sold with a note that read, "Beware, this vase brings death," and the man who bought the vase at the 1988 auction reportedly died soon after. The next man who bought it was a doctor who died 3 months later. In fact, if the reports are true, the longest anyone has ever been able to withstand the evil vase before succumbing to the curse is 3 months. As of today, it's unclear just exactly where this vase is, and so the mystery of the disappearing vase remains.